At dinner, I asked, just tell me when the family reunion is. My brother snapped, you're not part of this family, don't show up. Everyone laughed. I just got up and left. 4 days later, their loan payment bounced, and that night, my phone. Oh, you guys, I swear, there's nothing quite like the icy grip of betrayal, especially when it comes from your own blood. What started as a simple family dinner, a normal Sunday night, quickly spiraled into a chilling reminder of just how easily the people you love can stab you in the back and then laugh while they do it. I remember walking into my parents' house, just 20 minutes late, and everyone was already seated around the dining table. My brother, Dylan, shot me this smug smirk as I took the only empty chair at the end. I tried to play it cool, asked about the upcoming family reunion everyone had been buzzing about. That's when Dylan's face twisted into that cruel smile I knew too well. He looked me dead in the eye and said I wasn't part of the family and I shouldn't even show up. And then, the table erupted. Laughter. My parents, my sister Rachel, Dylan's wife Heather, all of them, laughing like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. I just sat there, frozen, fork still in my hand, unable to move, unable to speak. And not a single soul, not one person, said a word in my defense. So I quietly stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked straight out that door without looking back. The drive home felt like an eternity, even though I only lived 15 minutes away. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the highway. I glanced down and saw the family group chat absolutely lighting up. Dylan had already typed something about me being too sensitive. Rachel, my sister, added a laughing emoji. And then, my own mother messaged, telling me I was being dramatic and should just come back to finish dinner. I flipped my phone face down on the passenger seat and just kept driving. Honestly, this wasn't new. I'd been the black sheep of the family for as long as I could remember. Dylan? He went to Georgetown Law, graduated with honors, married Heather, who was practically dripping with old money from Connecticut. Rachel married a financial advisor, moved into a house with a 3-car garage in the suburbs. Me? I started a construction company with my buddy Marcus right after community college. We built decks, renovated kitchens, grabbed commercial projects whenever we could. It was honest work, and I was damn proud of it. But to my family, I was just the guy who worked with his hands, while they worked with their minds. My phone kept buzzing, relentlessly. I ignored it all the way home, all through the evening, all the way until I finally passed out on the couch watching a basketball game I couldn't even focus on. When I finally looked at my phone the next morning, there were 37 messages in that family chat. Most of them were jokes at my expense. A few were my mother insisting I apologize for leaving dinner early and making everyone uncomfortable. I didn't respond. I went to work, managed my crew on a school cafeteria renovation, came home exhausted, and tried desperately to forget about it all. Tuesday passed. Wednesday passed. Then, Thursday morning. I was reviewing invoices at my desk when my phone pinged with a notification I hadn't seen in years. It was from my bank. Loan payment failed. Insufficient funds in linked account. My stomach dropped. I opened my banking app, and my hands started shaking. 6 years ago, I'd co-signed a business loan for Dylan, $200,000 to help him start his law practice. He'd promised me 100 times he'd refinance within a year and get my name off it. He never did. I'd been watching that loan on my credit report ever since, a constant wait. But Dylan always made the payments on time, so I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it wasn't a noose around my neck. Now, the payment had failed. That night, my phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Dylan. I stared at his name, let it go to voicemail. He called back immediately. Then again, and again, 5 times in a row. Then my father called. Then Rachel. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Finally, I answered my father's 6th call. His voice was tight with tension. He told me I needed to talk to Dylan right away. There was a problem with the loan, and Dylan needed my help. I asked what kind of problem. My father just said Dylan would explain, and that I should call him back immediately. Then he hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. It was almost midnight. My hands were shaking. I knew whatever was coming was going to be bad. I called Dylan. He answered on the first ring. His voice was completely different from dinner just 4 nights ago. Friendly, warm, almost apologetic. He said he was glad I called. Said we needed to talk about the loan. I waited, saying nothing. Dylan cleared his throat and launched into his explanation. His law practice wasn't doing well. Actually, It hadn't been doing well for 8 months. He'd lost several major clients. Some cases had gone south, and his overhead was killing him. He'd missed the loan payment because cash flow was tight. Just temporary, he assured me. He'd make it up next month. But the bank was being difficult. They were calling him constantly. And since I was the co-signer, they might start calling me, too. I asked him how much he missed the payment by. Dylan went quiet for a moment. Then he said it wasn't just one payment. It was 3. He'd been juggling things, moving money around. But the bank had caught on. They wanted $53,000 immediately. 3 missed payments, plus penalties and fees. My mouth went dry. $53,000. I asked Dylan why he didn't tell me sooner. He said he didn't want to bother me. He'd been trying to handle it himself. I asked him how he planned to handle it now. Another long pause. Then Dylan said, "That's why I'm calling. I need your help." I told him I didn't have $53,000 just sitting around. He knew I ran a small business on tight margins. Dylan's tone shifted. He said I must have savings. I must have credit lines. He said he'd been making payments on this loan for 6 years, and now he needed me to step up. I reminded him he'd promised to refinance and get my name off the loan within a year. That was 6 years ago. Dylan's voice got harder. He said circumstances changed. The market was different. His practice needed time to stabilize. He couldn't refinance right now. I asked him what happened to all those guaranteed contracts he'd told me about 6 years ago, the ones that were supposed to make his practice a sure thing. Dylan got defensive. He said those contracts fell through. Business was unpredictable. He couldn't have known. I asked him when he was planning to tell me the loan was in trouble. He said he was telling me now. Then Dylan's tone changed completely. The friendly warmth evaporated. He said I owed the family. He reminded me of all the times they'd helped me. I asked him what times. He couldn't name a single one. He just repeated that family helps family. And right now, he needed help. I told him I'd see what I could do, but I couldn't promise anything. Dylan's voice turned cold. "You'd better figure it out," he snarled. "Because if this loan defaults, it will destroy both of us." Then he dropped the real bomb. He told me the family reunion I'd asked about at dinner. It wasn't just a reunion. It was an announcement party. Our parents were retiring and giving their vacation property in Lake Tahoe to him and Rachel. They'd decided months ago. I was never going to be included. They'd planned the whole thing without ever telling me. Dylan ended with, "You should know your place in this family by now." I hung up without saying another word. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank accounts. I had $31,000 in savings. Not enough. My business credit line was maxed out from equipment purchases 3 months ago. I had maybe $5,000 in available credit across all my credit cards. I was trapped. Dylan had trapped me 6 years ago when he begged me to co-sign that loan. And now he was calling in the debt. Not just the money, but the emotional debt, the family obligation, the unspoken rule that I was supposed to sacrifice for them because that's what the black sheep does. He takes the hits so the golden children can shine. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every horrible scenario in my head. None of them ended well. At 6 a.m., I called a lawyer I knew named Trevor. I told him I needed to see him immediately. He heard the panic in my voice and told me to come to his office at 8. Trevor's office was in a small building downtown, 3rd floor. No receptionist. He made his own coffee and kept his overhead low. I'd worked with him a few times on construction contract issues. He was straightforward and didn't waste time. I showed him the loan documents I'd printed out the night before. Trevor put on his reading glasses and went through every page in silence. His expression got darker with each page he turned. Finally, he set the papers down and looked at me. The news was worse than I'd thought. Trevor pointed to a clause buried in the middle of page 7, joint and several liability. It meant the bank could pursue me for the entire remaining balance of the loan, not just the missed payments. $178,000. Dylan had structured it this way deliberately. Trevor said Dylan's LLC protection meant the bank would absolutely come after me first because I was the easier target. I had personal assets, a house, a business. I was exposed in every direction. I asked Trevor what my options were. He leaned back in his chair and listed them. I could pay the $53,000 immediately, which I didn't have. I could file bankruptcy, which would destroy my business, cost me my house, and ruin my credit for years. I could sue Dylan for fraud, but that would take years, cost tens of thousands in legal fees, and probably fail because I'd signed the loan voluntarily. Or I could try to negotiate with the bank, but Trevor said they had no incentive to negotiate. They wanted their money, and they knew they could get it from me. Trevor's advice was to pay what I could and try to set up a payment plan. Maybe the bank wouldn't sue immediately if I showed good faith. Maybe I could buy some time. I asked him how much time. He shrugged. Weeks? Maybe a month or two if I was lucky. I left Trevor's office feeling like I was drowning. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and tried to think clearly. I needed to make Dylan understand what he was doing to me. I needed to make my family see that they were destroying my life. I drove to Dylan's house. He lived in an upscale suburb 20 minutes north of the city. 4-bedroom colonial with a 2-car garage and a perfectly manicured lawn. I pulled into his driveway at 10 a.m. Dylan's car wasn't there, but Heather's Mercedes was. I rang the doorbell. Heather answered wearing yoga pants and a fitted top, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked annoyed to see me. I asked if Dylan was home. She said he was at the office. I asked if we could talk. She sighed and let me in. We sat in their living room. Everything was spotless and expensive. Leather furniture, hardwood floors, a gas fireplace that probably cost more than my truck. I told Heather I needed to talk to her about the loan. She cut me off immediately. She said she knew all about it. She'd been managing Dylan's practice for the past year. She handled all the finances. I asked her if she understood what this was doing to me. Heather's expression didn't change. She said I was being dramatic. Dylan had hit a rough patch, but businesses have ups and downs. I needed to be a man and handle my obligations. I told her I'd co-signed the loan as a favor 6 years ago, and Dylan had promised to refinance. Heather waved her hand dismissively. She said, "Promises change when circumstances change. Dylan couldn't refinance right now. End of story." Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. Dylan had missed the payment deliberately. It was a test. They wanted to see if I'd step up and pay it myself without being asked. They were restructuring Dylan's business, and they needed to know if I was reliable, if I could be counted on. Heather stood up and walked to a desk in the corner. She came back with a folder. Inside was a document, a loan assumption agreement. She said if I signed it, I'd take full responsibility for the entire $178,000. Dylan would be released completely. His name would come off the loan. Just mine would remain. I stared at her in disbelief. I asked her if she was serious. She said, "Completely serious. This was the cleanest solution. I'd assume the loan, refinance it on my own terms, and everyone could move on." I asked her what happened if I didn't sign. Heather's expression went cold. She told me that if I refused, they'd make sure everyone in their professional and social circles knew I was trying to destroy Dylan's career over money. Dylan had connections all over the legal community. He had friends in city government. Heather said they'd make sure I never got another municipal contract for my construction business. They'd ruin my reputation, make sure everyone knew I was the kind of person who turned on family when things got difficult. I stood up. I told Heather she and Dylan could go to hell. I walked toward the door. She called after me, saying I was making a huge mistake. I didn't respond. I got in my truck and drove away, my whole body shaking with rage. That evening, I was sitting at home trying to figure out my next move when I checked social media. Dylan had posted something an hour ago. It was vague but pointed. He wrote about how hard it was when family members tried to sabotage your business during difficult times. How some people couldn't handle other people's success. How he was grateful for his real friends who stood by him. The comments were already rolling in. Friends and extended family members expressing support, telling Dylan to stay strong, asking who would do something so terrible. Nobody mentioned my name, but I knew it was coming. Dylan was building a narrative. I was going to be the villain. 2 days passed. I didn't hear from Dylan or my parents. I spent those days working, trying to focus on my business, trying to figure out what to do. Then Rachel called. Her voice was soft and sympathetic. She said she'd heard about the situation with Dylan and the loan. She said it was terrible and she wanted to help. She suggested we meet for coffee to talk it through, away from Dylan, away from our parents, just the two of us. I was desperate for any ally. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near her house on Saturday morning. Rachel hugged me when I arrived. She ordered us both coffee, and we sat in a corner booth. She asked me to tell her everything from my perspective. I did. I explained the whole situation, the co-signed loan, Dylan's promises, the missed payments, Heather's threats. Rachel listened, nodding sympathetically, asking questions. She seemed genuinely concerned. I told her I felt trapped. I told her I didn't have the money to pay off the loan. I told her Dylan was trying to destroy my business if I didn't cooperate. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said she understood. She said she'd talk to Dylan. She'd try to help mediate. She even asked if she could record our conversation just so she had the details straight when she talked to him. Sure, I said. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. But I was desperate, and she was my sister. That afternoon, the family group chat exploded. Rachel had posted an audio recording, but it wasn't the full conversation. She'd edited it, cut it up, made it sound like I was demanding money from Dylan, like I was threatening to ruin him. In the edited version, I sounded vindictive and cruel. She'd taken my words completely out of context. The extended family chat, which included aunts, uncles, and cousins, lit up with responses. Within an hour, I had dozens of angry messages. My uncle Gary, who'd given me my first construction job when I was 19, sent me a message saying he was disgusted. He said he never wanted to speak to me again. Cousins I'd grown up with called me a traitor, called me greedy, said they couldn't believe I'd treat Dylan this way. My mother sent a text. She said she didn't raise me to be this kind of person. She said family was supposed to support each other, not tear each other down. She said I should be ashamed. I tried to defend myself. I sent messages explaining what really happened. Nobody believed me. Rachel had gotten to them first. She'd controlled the narrative. I was the villain now, and nothing I said would change that. Then Trevor called. The bank had officially accelerated the loan. All $178,000 was now due immediately. They'd filed a formal demand. If I didn't pay within 30 days, they'd sue. Trevor said Dylan's lawyer had been feeding information to the bank, making me look like a flight risk, making it seem like I was trying to dodge responsibility. I asked Trevor how Dylan's lawyer even knew to do that. Trevor said Dylan's lawyer was probably coordinating the whole thing. They were building a legal case to force me into bankruptcy or force me to sign over assets. The next blow came 2 hours later. I got a call from the city procurement office. One of my contracts, a school renovation worth $80,000, was under review. Irregularities in the bidding process, they said. They needed to verify everything before proceeding. The procurement officer's name was Nathan Bradley. I looked him up. He'd gone to law school with Dylan. Then two of my private clients called within an hour of each other. Both said they needed to postpone their upcoming projects, family issues, budget concerns, vague excuses. I knew what was happening. Dylan was using his connections to strangle my business. That night, my business partner, Marcus, called. He wanted to meet first thing Monday morning. His voice was tense. He said we needed to talk about the future of the company. I asked him what he meant. He said we'd talk Monday. I barely slept that weekend. Monday morning, Marcus came to our office early. We sat across from each other at the conference table we'd bought used 5 years ago when we first started making real money. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He said he'd been talking to his wife all weekend. He had 3 kids, a mortgage. He couldn't afford to have his family's security threatened by my personal problems. I asked him what he meant by that. Marcus said if my financial issues threatened the business, he needed to protect himself. He'd talked to a lawyer about dissolving our partnership. He didn't want to do it, but he had to think about his family first. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus was the one person I'd thought I could count on. We'd built this business together from nothing. We'd worked 70-hour weeks, survived recessions, competed against bigger companies, and now he was bailing because my family was destroying me. I told Marcus I understood. I didn't, but I said it anyway. We agreed to talk more later in the week. He left. I sat alone in the office, surrounded by project plans and contracts and photos of buildings we'd worked on. Everything I had built was crumbling. My family had won. They'd isolated me completely, turned everyone against me, destroyed my reputation, and threatened my business. And I had no way to fight back. Dylan was a lawyer with connections. I was just a contractor with a high school diploma and a community college certificate. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall. I had 3 options: pay money I didn't have, sign away my business, or lose everything in bankruptcy. Dylan had backed me into a corner with no way out. I thought about just giving up, just letting it all collapse, starting over somewhere else with nothing. Then my phone buzzed. A message on LinkedIn from someone I didn't know. His name was Craig Thompson. The message said he'd heard through mutual connections that I was having problems with Dylan Miller. He said Dylan had screwed him over, too. He said we should talk. He said he might have information that could help me. I stared at the message for a long time. It could be a trap, another one of Dylan's moves. But what did I have to lose? I sent Craig my phone number. He called 5 minutes later. Craig's voice was careful and measured. He told me he'd been a client of Dylan's 3 years ago, a business litigation case. Dylan took a $70,000 retainer and promised aggressive representation, then did almost nothing. Let the case drag on. Let it settle for a fraction of what Craig could have won. And when Craig asked for the unused portion of his retainer back, Dylan refused. Said it had been spent on research and preparation. Craig knew it was a lie. I asked Craig why he was telling me this. He said he'd filed a bar complaint against Dylan. It went nowhere. Dylan had friends on the grievance committee. They buried it, called it a fee dispute, and suggested Craig take it to arbitration. Craig couldn't afford to pursue it further. He had to walk away. But he'd kept all his documentation. Every email, every billing statement, every piece of evidence that showed Dylan had stolen from him. Craig said he'd been waiting for years for someone to take Dylan down. When he heard through a mutual friend that Dylan's brother was having problems with him, Craig reached out. He wanted to help. I asked Craig what he wanted in return. He said nothing. He just wanted Dylan to face consequences. I didn't know if I could trust him, but I didn't have any other options. We agreed to meet the next day. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about what Craig had said. If Dylan had stolen from one client, maybe he'd stolen from others. Maybe there was a pattern. Maybe I could find enough evidence to destroy his law practice the same way he was trying to. Destroy my business. In the morning, I called Brooklyn. We dated in college, broke up when she moved to Chicago for grad school. She became a forensic accountant. We'd stayed friendly over the years, exchanging messages on birthdays and holidays. I hadn't talked to her in over a year, but I needed help, and she was the only person I could think of who might understand the financial side of this. Brooklyn answered on the second ring. I explained everything. The loan, Dylan's failing practice, the threats, Craig's story. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Brooklyn said she was appalled. She said what Dylan was doing wasn't just unethical, it was probably criminal. She said if his practice was really failing, there was likely evidence of financial crime somewhere. Commingling funds, fraudulent billing, something. I asked her if she could help. She said absolutely. She wouldn't charge me anything up front. If we found something useful, we'd figure out payment later. Right now, she just wanted to help. I almost cried with relief. Brooklyn said she needed access to Dylan's business records. I told her that was impossible. She said, maybe not. She asked if Dylan's wife managed the practice. I said yes. Brooklyn said she had an idea. She'd create a fake consulting company and reach out to Heather, offering free practice management analysis. Small law firms were struggling everywhere. Heather might bite if she was desperate enough. I thought it was a long shot, but Brooklyn said it was worth trying. She spent the afternoon building a fake website and a professional email address. The next morning, she reached out to Heather through LinkedIn. The message was perfectly crafted, sympathetic, professional, offering help with no strings attached. Heather responded within 24 hours. She was interested. She said Dylan's practice was going through a transition, and they could use some outside perspective. She sent over some basic financial summaries for the analysis. Brooklyn called me that evening. She was excited. The numbers didn't make sense. Dylan had been reporting income that didn't match his client billings. There were transfers to personal accounts that weren't properly documented. Red flags everywhere. She needed more detailed records to prove anything. But this was the beginning. Then the next blow hit. The bank called. They were done waiting. They were filing suit against me in 48 hours for the full $178,000, plus penalties and legal fees. The total was now $212,000. Once they filed, there would be an automatic lien on my assets, my house, my truck, my share of the business, everything. I had 2 days. Brooklyn said she'd work as fast as she could, but building a case took time. We needed more evidence, more victims, more proof that Dylan was running his practice like a criminal enterprise. That night, I got another message. This time on LinkedIn again, from Craig. He said he'd been making calls. He'd found 2 other former clients of Dylan's who had similar stories. One was a woman named Patricia who'd hired Dylan for a divorce case. He took a $40,000 retainer and then barely communicated with her. Let deadlines pass. Finally, she had to hire another lawyer to clean up the mess. Dylan kept the entire retainer. The other was a small business owner named Tom. Dylan represented him in a contract dispute. Took $35,000 up front, did minimal work. The case settled badly. Tom asked for an accounting of how his retainer was spent. Dylan sent a vague bill with no detail. Tom filed a bar complaint, too. It went nowhere. Craig said both Patricia and Tom were willing to talk to me. They'd kept their documentation. They wanted Dylan held accountable. I called Brooklyn immediately. She said this was huge. Multiple victims with the same pattern meant we could build a fraud case, but we still needed Dylan's actual business records. We needed to prove he was systematically stealing from clients and hiding the money. We had 36 hours before the bank sued me. I met with Craig, Patricia, and Tom the next day. We sat in a conference room at a library, spreading documents across the table. The pattern was obvious. Dylan took large retainers, did minimal work, kept the money. When clients complained, he either ignored them or sent bogus bills that didn't add up. He'd been doing this for at least 4 years. Brooklyn reviewed everything. She said Dylan wasn't just unethical. He was stealing. And if he was commingling client funds with personal accounts, that was a serious crime. Lawyers have to keep client money separate. If Dylan was mixing it all together, he could lose his license and face criminal charges. But we still needed proof. We needed his trust account records. We needed his actual financial statements. I had 36 hours. I decided to try something desperate. I called Dylan. I told him I had evidence of fraud and theft. I wanted to meet, just the two of us, no lawyers. Dylan was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. He said I was bluffing, but he agreed to meet. Probably thought I was coming to beg. We agreed to meet at a diner the next morning. I had 1 day left before the bank sued me. One chance to get Dylan to back down, or one chance to get him to confess on tape. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd play it. Brooklyn told me to stay calm, let Dylan talk. People like him couldn't help but brag when they thought they'd won. The next morning came too fast. I drove to the diner, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. This was it. Everything came down to the next hour. I got to the diner 15 minutes early, sat in a booth in the back, ordered coffee I couldn't drink. My stomach was in knots. Dylan walked in exactly on time, looking confident. He wore an expensive suit. His hair was perfect. He slid into the booth across from me with a smug smile. He asked if I was ready to stop embarrassing myself. Asked if I'd finally come to my senses. I didn't answer. I just slid a folder across the table. Dylan opened it. Inside was a summary Brooklyn had prepared. Details about Craig, Patricia, and Tom. The stolen retainers, the pattern of fraud, the evidence we'd collected. Dylan's face changed. The smugness vanished. His skin went pale. He stared at the papers for a long time. Then he looked up at me. His jaw was tight. He asked where I got this. I told him I'd been doing my homework, talking to his former clients. They'd been very helpful. Dylan's hands started shaking. He tried to play it off. Said it was all lies, fee disputes, misunderstandings. Every lawyer dealt with unhappy clients. I told him we had documentation. Emails where he promised work he never did. Bills that didn't match time records. Bank statements showing transfers from his trust account to his personal account. That last part was a bluff. We didn't have his bank statements yet, but I wanted to see his reaction. Dylan's face went white. He grabbed the folder, tried to close it. I told him there were copies. Brooklyn had everything. So did Craig. So did Patricia and Tom. Dylan stood up like he was going to leave. I told him to sit down. We weren't done talking. I laid out my terms. Within 24 hours, Dylan would contact the bank. He'd pay the missed loan payments. He'd refinance the loan in his own name, removing me completely. He'd drop all the fake liens against my business that I just learned about that morning. He'd leave me alone forever. In exchange, I'd give him 6 months to make things right with his former clients before we reported him to the Bar Association. Dylan sat back down. His face was red now, angry. He said I had no proof that would hold up in court. He said I was trying to extort him. He said he'd sue me. He said I had no idea who I was messing with. He stood up again, told me I'd regret this, started walking toward the door. Then the door opened. 2 men in suits walked in. Dylan stopped. They walked straight to our booth. One of them held up a badge. State Bar Association Investigative Unit. They said they needed to talk to Dylan about some complaints. Dylan's face went from red to gray. Brooklyn was sitting 3 booths away. I hadn't even seen her come in. She'd been recording everything, and she hadn't waited for my deal to play out. She'd reported Dylan to the Bar Association the day before, given them everything we'd found. The investigators had been building a case while I'd been setting up this meeting. Dylan's phone rang. It was Heather. He answered, his hand shaking. I could hear her voice from across the booth, high-pitched and panicked. The Bar Association had shown up at his office with a warrant. They were going through his files, going through his financial records. Client trust accounts were frozen. Word was already spreading. The local legal newspaper had gotten wind of it. Dylan sat down heavily. He looked like he might throw up. The investigators asked if he'd come with them to answer some questions. Dylan nodded. He looked at me for the first time. There was no smugness, no superiority, just fear. The investigators let him out. Brooklyn came over to my booth. She sat down and squeezed my hand. She said the Bar Association had moved faster than she expected. They'd found enough red flags in Dylan's finances to launch a full investigation. They'd frozen his accounts, suspended his ability to take new clients pending the outcome. My phone rang. It was Trevor, my lawyer. He sounded shocked. The bank had just called him. They were withdrawing their lawsuit against me. They'd learned about the fraud investigation. They didn't want to be associated with Dylan's case. They were working to remove me from the loan entirely. I was free. I sat there in disbelief. It was over. Just like that. Dylan's world was collapsing, and mine was saved. Over the next few hours, more news came in. 3 more of Dylan's former clients had come forward with complaints. The state bar was expanding their investigation. Dylan's malpractice insurance carrier was notified. They were reviewing whether to drop him. Several former clients were filing civil lawsuits. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was shrill. She was almost crying. She asked what I'd done. She said Dylan was destroyed. His practice was finished. His reputation was ruined. She said I'd torn the family apart. I asked her if she'd read the complaints, if she knew what Dylan had been doing. She said it didn't matter. He was family. I should have protected him. I told her Dylan had been stealing from clients for years. He'd tried to ruin my life to cover up his crimes. He'd used me as a scapegoat. She said I was exaggerating. Rachel got on the phone. She was crying, too, screaming at me, saying I'd destroyed Dylan out of jealousy, that I'd never forgiven him for being more successful. I hung up. I blocked both their numbers. I was done. 2 days later, more information came out. The Bar Association had found evidence that Dylan had been commingling client funds for years, using new client retainers to pay old client bills. It was a classic Ponzi scheme structure. When new clients stopped coming in, the whole thing collapsed. That's why he'd missed the loan payment. He didn't have any money left. He'd been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and he'd run out of Peter's. The business loan I'd co-signed? Part of it had been funded with client trust account money. That was a massive ethics violation. Criminal. Dylan hadn't just failed to pay back a legitimate business loan. He'd stolen client money to start his practice. Brooklyn found more. Dylan had been inflating his income on refinance applications for years, lying to banks about his earnings. That was loan fraud. The whole empire was built on lies and theft. Then my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. It was my father. His voice was quiet, defeated. He said he'd been going through Dylan's files. My mother had asked him to help Dylan organize his defense. But what he'd found had shocked him. He'd seen the evidence. The stolen money. The lies. The fake bills. He said he hadn't known. None of them had known. I didn't say anything. I just listened. My father said Dylan had lied to all of them. Told them his practice was thriving. That he was turning away clients. That I was just jealous and trying to sabotage him. They'd believed Dylan because he was successful, because he was the golden child, because they'd never thought to question him. My father said he was sorry. He said they should have listened to me. He said he understood if I never forgave them. I told him I needed time. I hung up. 2 days after that, I got another call. This one from my parents' estate lawyer. His name was Donald. He said there was a problem with the Lake Tahoe property. Because of Dylan's legal troubles and potential criminal liability, any assets transferred to him in the next few years could be seized by creditors or by victims in civil suits. Transferring the property to Dylan now would be reckless. It could be seen as an attempt to hide assets. The lawyer was recommending they not give the property to anyone right now. Maybe sell it instead. But my parents had asked a different question. If they couldn't give it to Dylan, would it be better to give it to me? I was clean. No legal troubles, no debt problems. I'd actually helped expose Dylan's crimes. Donald said he'd been asked to reach out and see if I was interested. I sat with that phone call for a long time. The Lake Tahoe property was worth about $800,000. My parents had bought it 30 years ago for a fraction of that. It had been their dream retirement spot, and now they wanted to give it to me. After everything, I called Donald back. I told him I wasn't interested. I didn't want anything from my parents. Not their property, not their money, not their guilt-driven attempts to make things right. He said he understood. He'd let them know. That night, Brooklyn came over. We sat on my couch, drinking beer and watching the city lights through my apartment window. She asked me how I felt. I told her I didn't know. Relieved, angry, sad, all of it at once. She said I'd done the right thing. Dylan had been hurting people for years. I'd stopped him. That mattered. I told her it didn't feel like victory. It felt like I'd burned down my whole family to save myself. She said, sometimes that's what survival looks like. The next week moved like a landslide. More of Dylan's victims came forward. The Bar Association's investigation expanded. Local news picked up the story. A lawyer accused of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from clients was big news. Brooklyn and Craig had become a team. They were documenting everything, building a comprehensive case. They'd found 7 victims total. The amount Dylan had stolen was over $400,000. Some of it he'd spent on his house, his cars, his lifestyle. Some of it had just disappeared into personal accounts. None of it had gone where it was supposed to go. The business loan I'd co-signed was just one piece of the puzzle. Dylan had taken out multiple loans using false income information. He'd lied to banks, to clients, to everyone. His whole professional life was a house of cards. Then the criminal charges came. The district attorney's office announced they were investigating Dylan for theft, fraud, and misappropriation of client funds. If convicted, he could face prison time. Real prison time, not just disbarment, not just civil penalties, actual criminal consequences. Heather filed for divorce. She released a statement through her lawyers saying she'd been deceived by Dylan. She hadn't known about the financial crimes. She was cooperating with investigators. She was taking their 2 kids and moving back to Connecticut to live with her parents. Dylan's perfect life was disintegrating. Marcus called me. He apologized, said he'd been scared and reacted badly. He said he wanted to keep our partnership together if I was willing. I told him I'd think about it. I understood his fear, but trust was hard to rebuild. We agreed to talk more in a few weeks. My business was recovering. The city contract that had been under review was reinstated. My private clients started calling again. People were reading about what happened. They understood now that I'd been the victim, not the villain. My reputation was being restored, but my family was a different story. My mother called several times. I didn't answer. She left voicemails saying they needed to talk, saying we needed to figure out how to move forward. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Rachel sent me a text, a long one. She apologized for the edited recording. Said she'd been manipulated by Dylan, too. Said she hadn't known the truth. I didn't respond. Her apology felt hollow. She'd been so quick to throw me under the bus, so eager to believe the worst about me. That didn't happen in a vacuum. 3 weeks after everything exploded, the Bar Association made their decision. Dylan's license was suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. He was forbidden from practicing law. His practice was officially dissolved. His former clients were referred to the state's Client Protection Fund to seek reimbursement for stolen money. Dylan moved back in with our parents. Heather had taken everything in the divorce filing, the house, the cars, custody of the kids. He had nothing left. He was living in his childhood bedroom at age 39, facing criminal charges, his career destroyed, his reputation in ruins. I should have felt satisfied. This was justice. He tried to destroy me and instead destroyed himself. But mostly, I just felt tired and sad. This was my brother. I'd looked up to him when we were kids. I'd wanted his approval, his respect. Instead, I'd gotten betrayal and cruelty, and now I'd played a role in bringing him down. Brooklyn reminded me I hadn't destroyed Dylan. He'd destroyed himself. I just refused to let him take me down with him. There was a difference. A month after the Bar Association's decision, my father called again. He asked if I'd come to dinner. Just him and my mother. No Dylan, no Rachel. He said they needed to talk to me, needed to explain some things. I agreed. I drove to their house on a Sunday evening. It felt strange walking through that door. The last time I'd been there was the night Dylan humiliated me at dinner. The night this all started. That felt like years ago. My parents were in the living room. They both looked older, tired. My mother had been crying. My father stood up when I walked in. He hugged me. That surprised me. We weren't a hugging family. We sat down. My mother started talking. She said they'd been blind. They'd favored Dylan his whole life, put him on a pedestal, made excuses for him. They'd done the same with Rachel. But with me, they'd been critical, dismissive. They'd treated my accomplishments like they didn't matter because I hadn't followed their preferred path: law school, graduate degrees, professional careers. I'd chosen a different road, and they'd punished me for it. She said they were sorry. She said they'd failed me as parents. She said they understood if I couldn't forgive them. My father said they'd been talking to a family therapist, trying to understand how things had gotten so broken. The therapist had helped them see patterns they'd been blind to for decades. The golden child, the scapegoat, the family dynamics that had poisoned everything. He said they wanted to do better. They wanted to rebuild, but they understood it would take time. They understood I might not be willing to try. I sat there listening. Part of me wanted to yell at them, to list every time they'd chosen Dylan over me. Every time they'd laughed at my expense. Every time they'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough. But another part of me was just exhausted. Yelling wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't change the past. I told them I appreciated the apology. I told them I needed time. I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine, but I wasn't cutting them off completely either. We'd take it slow, see how things went. They nodded. They said they understood. As I was leaving, my mother asked if I'd come to Thanksgiving. It was 2 months away. She said it would just be family. Dylan would be there, Rachel, too. But if I came, they'd make it clear that certain behaviors weren't acceptable anymore. No jokes at my expense. No dismissing my life. Real respect. I told her I'd think about it. Driving home, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not trust. But maybe the beginning of acceptance. My family had hurt me. They'd failed me in fundamental ways. But they were trying to acknowledge it. That was something. Not enough, but something. Brooklyn was waiting at my apartment when I got home. I'd given her a key a week earlier. We'd been spending most nights together, falling back into old patterns, old feelings. It felt right in a way. Nothing had felt right in years. She asked how it went. I told her about the apology, the therapy, the Thanksgiving invitation. She asked what I was going to do. I said I didn't know yet. She said whatever I decided, she'd support me. That night, lying in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. 2 months ago, I was the family scapegoat, the black sheep, the failure. I'd been trapped by a loan I never should have signed. My business was threatened. My reputation was destroyed. I had no allies and no way out. Now Dylan was the one facing ruin. I was free. My business was growing. I had Brooklyn. I had real friends who'd stood by me. Craig, who'd reached out when he had nothing to gain. Trevor, who'd helped me navigate the legal maze. Marcus, who'd apologized and wanted to rebuild. Patricia and Tom, who'd been brave enough to come forward. I'd lost my family, or at least the version of family I'd grown up with. But maybe that wasn't a loss. Maybe that was freedom. Thanksgiving came. I decided to go. Brooklyn came with me. I told my parents ahead of time that I was bringing her. They said, of course. They sounded genuinely happy I'd be there. We arrived at their house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Dylan's car was already in the driveway. So was Rachel's. My stomach tightened. Brooklyn squeezed my hand. We walked in together. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing. My mother was in the kitchen. She hugged me when we walked in. Hugged. Brooklyn, too. My father was in the living room. He shook my hand, smiled. Genuine warmth in his eyes. Dylan was on the couch. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His face was drawn. He had dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look up when I walked in. Rachel was sitting in a chair by the window. She gave me a tight smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Dylan's daughter, Emily, ran up to me. She was 8 years old, blonde hair and pigtails. She hugged my legs and asked where I'd been. She said she missed me at family dinners. My throat tightened. I told her I'd been busy with work. We sat down for dinner. The table was set nicely. My mother had made all the traditional dishes: turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce. For a while, everyone just ate in silence. It was awkward, heavy. Then Emily asked the question that broke everything open. She looked at me with those big, innocent eyes and asked why I didn't come to family events anymore. Why I was never around. The table went silent. Everyone stopped eating. My mother looked panicked. My father stared at his plate. Dylan's face went red. Rachel looked away. I could have lied. Could have made up something easy. But I was done with easy lies. I looked at Emily and spoke gently. I told her, sometimes people and families hurt each other. And when that happens, you have to protect yourself. It doesn't mean you stop loving them. but you have to love yourself more. You have to choose your own peace and safety first. My mother started to say something. My father put his hand on her arm. She stopped. Dylan stared at his plate. His hands were shaking. Rachel's eyes were wet. My father cleared his throat. He looked at me and said quietly, "We should have listened to you. We should have protected you. I'm sorry." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't everything I needed, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the first time my father had ever validated my pain in front of the whole family. The rest of dinner was quiet, but less tense. Emily chattered about school. My mother asked Brooklyn about her work. My father talked about a documentary he'd watched. Normal things, surface things, but there was an understanding underneath it all. Things had changed. The old dynamics were broken. What came next was uncertain. After dinner, I told my parents I'd come to future events, but only under certain conditions. They had to acknowledge what Dylan had done was wrong. They had to stop expecting me to pretend it didn't happen. They had to treat me with respect. Not as the black sheep. Not as the family failure. As an equal. They agreed. They said they'd try. They said it would be a process. I said I knew. I said I was willing to try if they were. We left it at that. Driving home with Brooklyn, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. She asked me how I felt. I told her I felt free. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely. I thought if I was helpful enough, successful enough, quiet enough when they mocked me, they'd finally see my worth. But that's not how it works. Real family, the people who truly matter, they see your worth without you having to prove it. They don't make you earn basic respect and kindness. Dylan didn't just try to steal my money. He tried to steal my dignity, my reputation, everything I'd built. And he almost succeeded because I was still operating under old rules. The rules that said family loyalty meant absorbing their cruelty and silence. The rules that said I was supposed to sacrifice myself so the golden children could shine. The moment I fought back, I lost almost everyone. And that was okay because what I lost wasn't real to begin with. You can't lose something you never actually had. I learned that protecting yourself isn't betrayal. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Walking away from people who hurt you isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing you can do. Some families are bound by love and respect. Others are bound by obligation and guilt. I finally understood the difference, and I chose to build something better. Dylan's still my brother. My parents are still my parents. But they're no longer the center of my universe. I am. And the people who love me for real? That's Brooklyn. That's Craig. The friends who stood by me. The employees who depend on me. The clients who trust me. That's my family now. And that reunion they didn't want me at, I threw my own. Filled it with people who actually wanted me there. Best decision I ever made. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into. Sometimes you have to build it yourself. One honest relationship at a time. And when you do, you realize you were never the problem. You were just in the wrong room. I walked out of that dinner 6 months ago with nothing but humiliation. Today, I have everything that actually matters. Funny how that works. The reunion's whenever I say it is, and everyone there actually wants me to show up. 6 months later, my business is thriving. Marcus and I rebuilt our partnership on stronger ground. We hired 3 new employees. We landed 2 major commercial contracts. The school renovation project that had been under review, it became one of our showcase projects. Word of mouth brings new clients every week. Brooklyn and I moved in together. Got a place with big windows and enough room for both of us to work from home when we needed to. She started her own forensic accounting firm, specialized in uncovering financial fraud. She has more work than she can handle. Dylan is still living with our parents. The criminal charges are moving through the system slowly. His lawyer is negotiating a plea deal. He'll probably avoid prison, but he'll have to make restitution to his victims, pay back what he stole. He'll never practice law again. His life as he'd known it is over. I don't take pleasure in that. It's just reality. Actions have consequences. He spent years stealing and lying. Now he's paying the price. Rachel and I talk occasionally. She apologized several times. Said she'd been wrong. Said she'd been caught up in Dylan's lies and had been too quick to judge me. We're working on rebuilding trust, slowly, carefully. But at least we're trying. My parents and I have dinner once a month, sometimes at their house, sometimes at a restaurant. We talk about safe things. Work, weather, sports. We don't dig into the deep stuff. Maybe we will someday, maybe we won't. But the relationship is civil, respectful. That's enough for now. The Lake Tahoe property? They sold it. Used some of the money to help Dylan pay his victims. Used the rest for their retirement. They even offered to give me some of it. I declined. I didn't want their money. Didn't need it. My business is doing fine. I'm building my own wealth, my own legacy. Craig and I stayed in touch. He's become a friend. We grab lunch every few weeks. Talk about business, life, sports. He found peace knowing Dylan had faced consequences. Justice mattered to him. It mattered to me, too. Looking back, I can see how close I came to losing everything. If Brooklyn hadn't helped, if Craig hadn't reached out, if I'd signed that loan assumption agreement, if I'd let Dylan and my family bully me into silence, everything I'd built would be gone. But I didn't let that happen. I fought back. I found allies. I exposed the truth. And I survived. More than survived. I built a life I was proud of. A life surrounded by people who actually cared about me.